we are getting around the corner on this thing. So we got a problem identified, right? We know what's going on. How you communicate a situation where you are out of equipment or out of time, as in labor, or out of material, is critical. How we do this, how we deal with a pre-sold situation is critical in this time. So when you don't have enough labor to fulfill your customers' expectations, they want it tomorrow, yes, right? They want it tomorrow. Well, what if you've got 3 weeks worth of work already pre-sold? Well, if you call it pre-sold as opposed to I'm 3 weeks behind. See, 3 weeks behind sounds like you're not in a good shape. You know, you're not in a good position. 3 weeks pre-sold says I am in such high demand that I got people waiting in line for my business. I just went to go get lunch before this call, and I went down the street to Chick-fil-A, and they had cars wrapped around their building, 2 lines, and a whole bunch of people in the parking lot having food delivered to their car in the parking lot. And people were waiting in line. They got all kind of material, right? But what we have in our situation is we got a limited amount of labor. We've only got so many hours in the day. We've got a limited amount of equipment, and some of that's getting even harder and harder to come across, just because, just like the toilet paper issue that we've been experiencing, some people are actually hoarding equipment. So we got to think about, okay, if I'm short on labor, if I'm short on equipment, if I'm short on materials, what about IAQ products? Try to buy an IAQ product lately? Pretty short on supply as well. What do you do? What do you do? So let's look, I got 5 different ideas I want you to think about. Idea number 1 has to do with safety, right? So as we think about safety, you think about anything to do with safety, and the easiest kind of safety example that I can come up with is, what about if you had a gas furnace in a person's home and it had a busted up heat exchanger, or it had busted up venting systems, and we were dumping carbon monoxide into the home? Much better from a safety standpoint to provide a temporary heating solution than leave an unsafe unit running, right? So from a safety standpoint, being prepared to have temporary systems that you can apply for your customer, that you can bring to the table for your customer. Back in the day, when my dad was owner of Holt Service Company in Columbus, Georgia, where I live, we had temporary heaters. So during the winter months, we had our logos stenciled on them, so you know they knew they were ours. Number 1, they had serial numbers that we printed on them, so that they, again, knew that they were ours. And we checked them out just like you would check out a book in the library. We would check them out to a job, and we would put 2 or 3 unit heaters in someone's house, or space heaters in someone's house, to keep them warm during the colder months, if we were pre-sold to the extent that they might have to spend 3 or 4 nights without their replacement equipment. So having a plan, especially as it relates to safety, because safety is not optional. Being comfortable actually is optional, but when it becomes unsafe, we got to be able to solve that problem right away. So let's look at the health aspects of it. So what if they have a health issue, right? Let's say they got a problem with air quality. And when you're trying to deal with health issues, if we could go to the next slide real quick. If we go to health issues, there's a whole lot of IAQ products that are out there on the market that aren't available right now because, again, they're going like hotcakes. Well, how do you solve IAQ problems when traditional IAQ products aren't available? Well, actually a very underlooked, overlooked opportunity is to bring fresh air into the house. Okay, my buddy John Ellis took over for me for the last 2 weeks in this slot, and I really appreciate him doing that because that guy's an IAQ expert. He knows what he's talking about. And part of what he talked about in the last session was he talked about, hey man, ventilation. Ventilation, it's kind of important. Well, it's real easy if you understand how to do this, and it's not really difficult to do. It's real easy to introduce fresh air through the HVAC system for a ducted system. It's really kind of simple. right? So if you understand how to do that, you can actually start solving some health issues. So what about comfort? From a comfort standpoint, I mean, we got a crazy looking orange box over here. Can you imagine somebody putting something like that next to their house and leave it there? No. Well, this is something I learned a long time ago back in the 90s. We actually had equipment that we had taken off of people's homes. We were pretty proactive in how we did our sales process, and we were upgrading people's equipment before it broke down. Okay, so the equipment was functional, it was just old. So we were upgrading it before it broke down. Well, we didn't just throw that equipment that was functional into the trash heap. What we did is we told the installers, listen, we're going to take that one as a loaner. So when you pull it out, make sure you don't, leave a lot of copper filings and stuff like that. Cut the tubing off and don't use a hacksaw, right? Use your tubing cutters, put a cap back on it, sweat that cap on so that when we want to use it, we know we got a clean refrigerant system. Do not tear all the wires up. Be careful when you remove all the wires. We're going to take that unit. We brought it back to the shop. We cleaned it up, but then we painted it the most ugly orange that we could find. Why did we do that? Well, because we didn't want the customer to actually want us to keep it on the side of their house. But think about how much easier is it to change out a condensing unit than it is to go in and wait for 3 weeks to get the right condensing unit that the customer really wants and what they really deserve. How much better is it for me to put the customer on ice, right? In fact, window units, we used window units a lot. Again, we had our logos on it. We had a serial number on it. We had loaner cooling systems. So we call them temporary cooling units, right? And these temporary cooling units made a bunch of money for us because they were just running temporarily, right? We got them back up and running with as little effort as possible on our end, but we did it in such a way that the customer was saying, wow, you guys are going above and beyond. We love you guys. And we got maybe 3 or 4 weeks down the road before we got them on the schedule. I mean, they were on the schedule, but it was 3 or 4 weeks later that we were actually upgrading the rest of their system and putting in the equipment that they actually ordered. Sometimes it just wasn't available, or more importantly, sometimes we weren't available. What about efficiency, right? What if a customer wants the higher efficiency equipment, and that higher efficiency equipment, which is in demand, in other words, not in stock, right? That high efficiency equipment that's high in demand is also going to keep you from completing a job that you would otherwise complete. Well, guess what? Same strategy. You can swap out a furnace pretty quick. Put a loaner in there, right? Put a temporary unit in there. Paint it ugly orange. Make sure they realize, no, this is not your furnace. This is my furnace. I'm loaning it to you. Now, here's what's cool. I was talking to our EGIA rep about financing this week earlier, or we were talking about it earlier this week. And one of the things I asked him as a contractor is I said, you know what, if I do that temporary cooling thing or that temporary heating thing, would I be able to actually get paid for that work and then get paid the rest of the job when the job was closed? I'm going to let Matthew talk about that in a little bit. So again, behind or pre-sold, what is it? The way you talk about this is going to make a big old difference. It's a mindset thing, right? But what we're trying to do in terms of maintenance here is we're trying to maintain that relationship with our customers and with the distributors, because guess what? The challenges you're facing, they're facing it too. So we're in this together. And what we have to do as a team is figure out how can we make the best of a bad situation.